Hi folks, Andy here. Been a while since I've done one of these, mainly due to getting Christmas out of the way and been busy with work related stuff. But I'm back now and I'm going to continue wrapping up this James Herbert ranking. We've got 7 books left. So at number 7, I'm going to talk a little bit about, his debut novel, The Rats from 1974. Um, the Rats was the very first James Herbert book that I ever read, and the book that got me into him. And it's one of, I think, the defining examples of early 70s pulpy horror. I mean, to the fact that it tells a story that's as much about the grimness and misery and struggle of early 70s England as it is about the rats themselves. I mean, England in the 70s and 80s was a pretty grim place in terms of unemployment and the government. You know, we're getting back to that stage now, to be honest, but it wasn't a great time to be alive. And the Rats details London and the grey, smoggy, industrial, um, unemployed, sort of economic and urban nightmare that really it was back then. And it uses rats kind of as a metaphor for, the the festering, scavenging waste. I mean, the rats here are horrific killing machines, and I mean, anybody who thinks rats can't be scary or brutal or violent, this book was one of the earliest examples of a creature feature. Um, it reminds me a bit of the sort of stuff that there's quite a few other authors that write, the equivalent of 50s B movies, but with 70s um, horror film violence. And I think what Herbert really did here was a great example of making a book that could potentially have been taken as a very silly story and making it just very visceral. It's not a deep story, despite the fact that it does have some good subtext to it. And it's a story that, it's a very short, very simple, quite novice in terms of its approach and its use of language and writing. It's a very basic entry into his career, but it is hard hitting and visceral and the exact sort of thing that other authors, like in particular Sean Hudson, would latch onto when he started writing, for example, Slugs, in 1982, and other books that followed on from them. And this book stuck with me in terms of the sheer amount of brutality, and it showcased Herbert was completely unapologetic and unafraid to tackle violence in a way that I think very few pulpy books had done prior to this. The story, it's just very fast paced, very action packed, and yeah, makes rats a legitimate threat to humanity. Not just because individually these things are much bigger and more feral than your average rat, but en masse. These things again. It's one of those things where there's a multitude of them, and you can even see this as some sort of take on disease or migration or anything like that, but in a really toxic manner in terms of how you're overwhelmed by this endless force. Um, I just think this is a really hard hitting and great pulp horror book, and especially for a debut novel. It doesn't try and be clever. It's not trying to do anything other than have a good idea and give you a good time with it. But for me personally, The Rats is a genuinely great debut novel. It was Herbert finding his voice right from the start, and although he'd go on to write better things and become a better author, in terms of simplicity and ideas, this was right up there as one of the best things he's done, and a book that I love. And the reason why I've placed this a little higher than Domain, whilst Domain has a better environment and it is a better written, much bigger, richer book, I think just the sheer visceral nature of this and how simplistic and to the point it is, it's not distracted or padded with anything other than what it needs to be. It's just something that I find I can go to and read and just enjoy. And we're splitting hairs really here because we all like what we like. But for me, The Rats is just a really great visceral pulp horror, and especially at this point in my life, I've started to really appreciate and enjoy just pulp horror as a genre. So The Rats I'm putting at number 7. I'll wrap it up there because there's not really much more I can say about it. other than it's about killer rats, you know. But it's a great book, and it's my number 7.